professional work, and as well I do what's called community engaged work. And I started working with seniors in southern Wellington County back in 2014. And I'm going to be talking about the process of creating a play about it's about hope and resilience, but it's also about suicide, which explains the size of our group today. So I'm sure that the people who are here know something about suicide and the importance of it as a topic. And I'm just going to talk about how that play came into being. And with me is Ross Coulter. You want me to introduce you, or do you want me
I'll introduce myself.
Okay, all right.
She said I'm Ross Coulter. Well, I have worked with Catherine. I'm here as a contributor. I've contributed to both of the plays that she has been involved in. More than that, or just the two?
The two we work together.
Yeah. As a contributor to the content.
Yeah.
Certainly I'm retired. Very, very involved with the Guelph Wellington Seniors Association, executive level and other committees. And that's what took me to meet Catherine in the first place. But that's another story, we'll get to that. Unless you want me to elaborate now.
No, well, why don't we just start with the background? Does that make sense?
Sure, okay. Well, you know the background of how you started our senior selfies. I fell into that. This is a situation where I found the group. They didn't find me. Okay. As a member of the executive of GWSA, past president on the board of directors, sitting on various committees, one important committee is membership and marketing. And I guess I can designate as the ambassador. I take the message of the association out to the community at large with presentations and so on. And of course, to stimulate membership in GWSA, we're 2,600 members, but we drop off one and we try to fill the other, and that's what happens. Anybody here belong to the Seniors Association? Yeah, you would know that.
I'm on the edge.
Yeah. So, going to my mail slot at the Senior Center in Guelph one day, I found this little flyer. It was done by Catherine's group, looking for participants in this project. I thought, oh, the Seniors Project. It said where they were meeting and when. So I thought, okay, I wonder how many seniors are there. I think I'm going to see if I can promote the GWSA. Scare up some membership. I got sucked in.
I was going to say, I think that went the other way.
That's how I found them.
It turned out to be a two-way thing. There were people who were members of the Guelph Wellington Seniors Association.
And certainly the Senior Selfies production that was underway at the time, that Catherine was facilitating information to put it all together, there were certain elements, the one element in particular that affected me insofar as I had suicidal depression after marriage, breakup, etc. And I wrote a story, third person, and provided it to Catherine, and she was able to incorporate it as a part of that production. Cool. Little did I know as a participant, that I stayed with it from that point on, to develop it. Little did I know that I was committing myself to performance.
Did you get an Oscar?
Standing ovation. But,
Maybe you could make a woman Oscar shape or something.
but I label myself as a ranked amateur when it comes to performing arts. That was my very first effort on stage, and I rather enjoyed it. And at the end of each performance, we did 2 performances. At the end of each performance, I got a real rush and an enlightenment as to what drives performers.
Yeah.
It really was such a feeling, standing ovation and all of that, with tears coming to my eyes, wow. And you could see what it was that performers experience. Not that it's driven me to the stage in any way, shape, or form, but
we're still hopeful.
yeah.
You'll let that back.
But the content had to do with, my content had to do with, contribution had to do with my suicide. It wasn't my story. The story was written third person. It was really my story. And Catherine glommed onto it and incorporated that into that bit. But because of my experience with the suicidal depression, I was prevailed upon to help contribute to the production afterwards.
Well, why don't we go back and talk about our voices for a little bit first, because that was the starting point for this. And as Ross said, that was a group that I was interested in creating. We got a New Horizons for Seniors project grant in South Wellington County. And the goal was to create a play by seniors, about seniors. And by the way, the stipulation that they put on it was, there's no way I'm going to act in this play. Like, I'll come and talk, but there's no way I'm going to act in this play at all. So don't even ask me. So I didn't. Secretly, I was wondering, so in April, so come October, how are we going to put this play on? But you know, this is theater, right? Things happen and then things work out in the end. So it all turns out okay. We advertised this group through the Guelph Wellington Seniors Association, through the local public libraries in the south part of the county. And there were, in the end, there were 12 seniors who came out. And we created together the mandate of what the play would be about. And the goal was to present a play, not what is usually seniors theater, which is very valuable, about kind of where I come from and my time back in the farm 60 years ago. It's about what's life like for rural seniors right here, right now. And the other goal was to create a play where the seniors were the hero of the scenes instead of the butt of the jokes. Many of which were misapprehensions anyway. Because for one thing, people were often telling me when I was creating this, oh, I bet you have a lot of great jokes about social media, just like people trying to use computers. And I was like, that is so 20 years ago, you know? These people are extremely savvy, and that actually became the joke in a scene that Ross was in about social media. About used car salesman, right? Who's this young kid who's kind of totally hapless and unable to use his computer, whereas the senior next to him is texting away, and kind of turning those stereotypes on their heads. So that's what we focused on in the first production, and I have a couple slides on that. So this was the show, Our Voices Senior Selfies, the first play that was produced. And you can see maybe Ross there on the side to the right, in the middle. As Ross said, the play was way oversold. It was sold out, and we had to turn people away. This was the creation process that we used. So we met at a retreat center down by the river. I originally had all kinds of big ideas about what we could do. Like, we'd do forum theater, we'd do tableaus, writing, and the group was totally not into that at all in the first year. Like, really not. And some people said, like, I don't write freehand because I have arthritis. Right? I can only compose on a computer.
Just something interesting in that picture. Do you know something stands out in that picture?
You're right there, dead center.
I'm the only guy.
Okay. There's that one right here at the end.
Ed's there.
Yeah. Oh, is that there? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
But you are right in the center.
Yeah. So what this group wanted to do was to sit and talk. And one thing I have learned from facilitating groups is, of course, you always start from where they are, right? Not from where I thought would be a great jumping off point. Were you going to say something, Frank?
No, I was just going to say that, first of all, I want to apologize. I was running off the mark about the name. I didn't realize you were the facilitator and that you were ready to go. So,
It's okay.
I mean, no, I'm sorry about that.
We got an hour and a half.
No rush.
I was going to say that, it's been my experience that, especially with suicide, and discussions about it, men are in the minority because the men probably need it the most in terms of talking about it and dealing with it. Was that your experience? Was that always the case that?
Not with this group.
Okay.
Well,
Not so much this group.
yeah, let me get to that, because this is kind of the prelude
Yeah.
to how we
All right.
started. And this is the process. So the Our Voices group is not the group that produced the play about suicide. But they were the
Okay.
window to it,
All right.
actually through Ross. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the background
Right.
for how I started doing community engaged work. So, for example, we've been meeting for 4 years, and by the second year, you can see the difference. Everybody was totally into doing
Yeah.
mask and clown
Yeah.
and all kinds of stuff. If I tried this in year one, I think everybody would have just jumped in their
Yeah.
cars and gone home.
Yeah.
Right? But after they'd done a show, they realized they saw themselves as actors. And the whole purpose of doing this show was to make people appreciate their stories. Because after they sat around for a couple weeks and talked, one of them said to me, you know, Catherine, I really feel sorry for you because you have to take all our ramblings and turn them into a play. And I was so shocked at that, for saying that, because to me, it was like gold, right? I was just sitting there taking notes, thinking this was like a fabulous discussion. So I took away one of the stories, a very simple story about going to visit the doctor, which probably many of us have experience with. Where going to visit a doctor who's not the best listener, who's kind of like, well, what can you expect at your age, right? And a doctor. And I took that conversation and turned it into a scene. And the next week, handed out the parts and everybody read it. And they laughed. I couldn't believe it. That was actually quite funny. And even though they had laughed when the story had been told, they never thought of it as the stuff of a play, right? So in the end, the process we decided on was a series of standalone scenes about all kinds of different things. So there's one called Generation Gap, a grandmother and grandson. He's trying to teach her how to play Minecraft. And then in the end, she tries to teach him how to use a rotary phone. Yeah. Basically. Right. So then there's ones obviously about rekindled love from these people were met after 40 years. Then there's another picture of Ross with a woman. He's a used car salesman. And then the bottom right that's actually me.
Yes.
Because that was a very poignant story. Many of them were funny, like the used car salesman or the doctor's visit. This was a story about a daughter coming out as lesbian. And no one would play the lesbian daughter.
Oh,
So I stepped in to play the lesbian daughter. There's the doctor scene, that's Roz with the doctor. The next one is a group discussion where one day somebody said, you know what we haven't talked about in our group? We've never talked about SEX. Which was a hint of how keen people were to talk about it. And it was the quietest discussion ever, right? Everyone just sat there. We did a short scene about that. Yeah. It was not a fertile discussion. Oh, that seemed quickie. And then we had things like a game show about people who think they're helping other people. So if you see somebody who's fallen down, you just rush over and pick them up. Or I learned a lot about kind of working with people on that. So while this play was going on, Ross joined our group. And Ross also, because he works with the Guelph Wellington Seniors Association, knows somebody from the Suicide Awareness Council in Wellington Dufferin. And they had done a youth play called A Permanent Solution, play about suicide, that they toured. What's that?
Great play.
Yeah, great play.
Everybody might learn that.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they toured it through schools. Their whole focus, the Suicide Awareness Councils, is even though they're made of health professionals, they're made up of largely health professionals, their focus is on peer-to-peer linkages, right? Peer-to-peer help. And they actually call it Tim Hortons therapy, right? Where you sit down and you actually talking to people. Because isolation is the biggest concern, right? One of the biggest concerns. So they, what was I going to say? They had this play. They wanted to do a seniors initiative. The youth initiative had led to a bunch of peer-to-peer stuff happening in schools. So they thought, we're just going to go to senior centers and have some peer-to-peer stuff happening. They had a whole big initiative on that with a very good facilitator. And nothing happened because older adults were not willing to talk about this subject. Right? They just hadn't talked about it for a long time and they weren't willing to talk about it. So then the council got this great idea, we're going to do a play. And asked Ross, do you know someone who could write a play? And he had just been to Our Voices, and he said, yeah. I'm working with somebody else on another project. So Ross is actually instrumental in linking us up. And their idea, the council's idea, was we use the same process, right? Which is why I talked about the Our Voices process. advertise, get a group of people around the table, and write a play about different aspects of suicide. And I thought to myself, you know, I mean, they're the experts on suicide, but it doesn't sound to me like there's going to be like a lot of uptake on that. And there wasn't. There was like no uptake on it. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and started looking at ways to engage people and to talk about this subject, right? Particularly rural seniors. And so in the end, what I did was, we did the same kind of advertising. I met individually with people, usually in their homes, and they told me their story. And I wrote it up as a first-person story. So if I was telling your story, it would be like, this happened to me, and this happened to my brother, and this is how I felt about it. And then I shared the stories with them back and forth. I assured them nobody else will see the story unless and until you are comfortable with it. And the stories were all made anonymous to some degree, depending on the extent that people wanted. Some people had a very public story, but actually everybody's story was made anonymous. Some people, the details were changed really significantly. Other people were okay with just a couple tweaks. And I don't know, do you have any comments about what that was like,
Well, I
having
don't-
your story?
Well, I don't know how the group got together. We met at Wellington Seniors Complex.
Yeah,
I don't
that
know how
came
that-
afterwards,
Yeah,
right?
and I don't know, that's when I first became involved.
Yeah,
Sitting-
well, actually,
sitting with the
you
group.
told me your story down by the river,
Yeah.
right? Because Ross had, as he said, written this story in third person about a friend of his who struggled with depression, and we put a short version of that in Our Voices show. It was one of the most powerful scenes. And Ross decided to play the main character.
Why not? It's my story.
Yeah, so we had the opportunity to take all these stories from different people. I put them together, and then everyone knew what their own story was and that it was anonymous to the extent they wanted it to be. So we met in two different groups for 3 weeks, for a 3-week period, like once a week. And I had been so concerned about, respecting the stories, respecting confidentiality, all that kind of thing. At the first meeting, people flipped through it, right? They found their story, and one person said, "Okay, so mine's a 4 story."
I didn't like it.
Yeah. And this is what happened, and I realized, wow, just if this project is nothing else than to help some of the participants actually talk to each other, because they knew they were in a room with a whole group of people who had struggled with suicide in their friends, and their families, with themselves, right? And they felt very comfortable. One person said, I haven't talked about this since 1985 when it happened. So there was nobody to talk to. And now I have people to talk to.
One thing the role in our seniors that I was part of is the transition. It starts off in suicidal depression, and the discussion goes on, and then change the scene. Time has gone by. A new life has been found, and that's now portrayed on in a more upbeat manner. So you can see that transition in the actual performance. And I don't know, well, that's the same thing in Afterways. That's incorporated in Afterways as well.
Yeah.
And the reasons behind the transition. My particular reason, personally, and I don't mind having come out of suicidal depression, psychiatric help, doing analysis, unfolding my universe as it should have been, and so on. I went online and found a wonderful woman. And that's how I became, I moved to Guelph. She was in Guelph. I moved to Guelph and set up life together. And she encouraged me, get involved in something. That's why I got into the Guelph Wellington Seniors Association. I joined Toastmasters, etc. So it just progressed from there. And the whole, I would have to say, participating in the play and giving life to my experience, it kind of validated where I was at this stage in my
Ross, can I ask a personal question? if you don't mind?
Yeah.
How long was it between your onset of your depression and your suicidal ideations, and your turnaround, coming out the other end.
That's 2 years.
Yes.
Yeah, I did about 6 months with a psychiatrist who wasn't serving me well.
Yeah.
And I remember the day of my last visit with her. In your state of mind, don't do anything rash. The next day, I up and left my wife. Walked out of the house. That was it. Right? And I continued with her for a little bit, and then I moved in with my sister. My sister encouraged me to, why don't you, Einelson, I want you to go see him, the Jungian analyst. And
Right.
oh my God, he just turned it around.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. But you do need help.
Oh, absolutely.
So, really powerful for your audience, you talked about that not only people on the stage, so the people that you've worked with have been able to talk through this and come to a place where they own their story and they're prepared to tell it to other people. And now you're performing that to people in the audience going, oh my goodness, that's my story.
Right.
And then, you're just perpetuating a larger audience, more people to give to each other.
Yeah, I mean, there's two main goals, right? Three. One is to present a good, powerful play about resilience and hope, but it's also breaking stigma. It's still a major issue. Often a bigger issue in smaller communities, where there can be a fair bit of judgment, right? Big cities, we
And
don't
you
know
can't-
each other.
And you can't lose yourself.
Right.
You can't walk away.
Right.
I know.
Because everybody knows.
I've broached similar topics to we have a Pride and Crime Theater, which is very successful, but they wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole because their idea, and this is fair enough, their idea of entertainment is farce. They
Yeah.
want people to laugh, which is totally valid, but there are lots of stories and lots of suicides that aren't being dealt with in the community. And I found it very frustrating. And as I was sharing earlier, I thought, well, okay, I'll start with the churches. The churches were the worst offenders. They wouldn't hear it. I was offering them my training in suicide intervention for free. And their only concern was, what's your faith background? Are you Catholic? Are you Protestant? Are you Episcopalian? And I was just blown away and angered that,
Closed mind.
oh, Jesus, yes, pardon my expression. Yeah,
That's about it.
yeah.
Well, that said, I'm sorry you've had that experience with churches because there is a former.
I just said the wrong ones, probably.
Yeah, there was a former Anglican minister who sits on the Suicide Awareness Council, who is absolutely wonderful, right, and very open to all kinds of things, right, and having this show in her community and without asking that question,
Yeah,
right?
to
What
find
is
the
her
right
background? Yeah.
To start the
And I think
conversation.
projects like this help with creating more people
Yeah.
inside or outside of faith
Yeah.
communities
Yeah.
who do have that broader perspective and do realize, okay, this is not something that you necessarily solve through prayer
No.
or whatever.
No.
This is there's other ways
Yeah.
this can be
Well,
tackled.
Yeah.
I had one concern in representing my story on stage and the way it went forward, and that's the fact that a new lady in my life and some of her lady friends attended the performance, and I thought she would be able to read into it that this, because she knows my history, and she was very, very aware of the situation. And I was not looking for her, but I visualized her sitting like this, reading into, oh boy, I hope my friends don't
Yeah.
laugh because while you do need to talk about it, you have a limited audience that you should talk to. About,
yeah.
You don't want to broadcast
No.
all over.
Yeah. And what was her reaction to seeing you on stage in the Argosy show?
Well, she knew it was coming because I.
Oh, you shared the script with her?
Oh, sure.
But it was more her relationship with her friends who
Yes.
didn't know.
That's right.
Yeah.
And how they would take it and how they would talk
So,
about her.
when you're
Oh, it's
putting something like this
complicated.
together, you should be aware that
Yeah.
that could be a result.
And that's part of the writing challenge, right? Is coming up with a story that is not just, trotting out somebody's story, right? And one of the things we did when we met on this project, on the Afterwise project, was I talked to people about kind of what makes a good play, the arc of a play, and of all these stories that are in this book, and not everybody identified the stories, but some people did. Of all the 14 stories that are in here, what could be an interesting arc for a person, given that we want to end up with a play about hope and resilience, right? And one of the things that the groups in plural came up with was, there's two types of people who die by suicide. There's somebody who just seems to be living a normal life. You have no clue, and all of a sudden they have a horrible shock, which doesn't look like a horrible shock to me necessarily, but to them. This happens particularly to men, and they go and kill themselves, right? They shoot themselves in the head or something violent and dramatic. And then there's the type of suicide that I'm more used to reading about, which is kind of the downward spiral of depression. Somebody's just getting more and more isolated for different reasons and having mental health and not being willing to talk to others, right? So we found a way to put both of those into the play and end up with a message of hope and resilience in the end, right? But it's a difficult conversation. And the play, benefited so much from having 2 readings where all the participants were invited to attend, as well as the members of the Suicide Awareness Council. And they, gave ideas for strengthening the play. And then we started touring it. Late in 2016 was the first tour. So the Our Voices show had the participants acting in it. This show does not have the participants acting in it. We use.
Can I just ask you one other question? How did you get the stories? Did people self-select? Did they know? Did you reach out? Did you pick up the phone and call somebody, as somebody who was formerly of the group, say, "How have you been feeling lately? Any suicidal thoughts?" Like, how did you find the people who wrote this? That you wrote the stories about?
Oh, well, we advertised in
okay.
seniors' residences. We advertised first to do a group session. And
And what was the other? What did it say? Come and talk about. Do you want to be part of a
it said, "Your story could save a life."
Your story.
That was
Love that.
the title.
Okay. Yeah.
Your story could save a life.
Okay. And then
If
people-
you have experience with suicide, we know it's a difficult. This was the second version. First version was a little more open, the
Yeah.
unsuccessful version.
Yeah,
Right?
okay.
Just come out to a group and we'll talk about.
Yeah.
No. So the second time, your story can save a life, and if you would like to confidentially tell your story to a playwright, and the story will be made anonymous, and the story will not be used unless you agree. So you have to
And
start
they
off with
called
that
you?
level
Is your
of
phone
trust.
number there? They called you?
Well, there were the Suicide Awareness Council members, right? We're all doing outreach. I did outreach through Our Voices group, and that's when Ross agreed to be a participant. And
And so you rented their home and you talked to them on a
wherever they
one-to-one.
wanted to.
Just went really slowly to build.
Yeah, and most
Their
of them,
trust.
most of them wanted to meet at their homes. And then however long the story took, there were some people who the story took half an hour. The stories that were no more than 2 pages. Some people it was 2.5 hours, right? Because, different people have, I love, right? I love the way people tell their stories. I love to do it without, interrupting them and just listen to what goes on. And then they had it kind of hand, and so by the 3rd week, I had sort of had some plot points, so this could happen, right? We want to make this story about a man, because men over the age of 55 are the most at-risk group for suicide in Canada. That's according to Statistics Canada, right? We all hear a lot about youth. God knows that's a tragedy as well, and there was a high incidence in youth, but men over 55 are the most
Males
at-risk
in
group.
particular, alcohol, which is
Yeah.
quite
Testimonial. Oh, I didn't get that far. I was on the verge.
Did anybody bring up end of life issues as opposed to? There's a difference between, I think, between suicide and
Assisted suicide.
assisted suicide.
I don't like
Yeah.
the wording when you say assisted.
No,
Yeah.
It's called assisted.
No,
I work in a
yeah.
hospital.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna call it?
No, that was.
Assisted dying
Assisted dying.
is what it is.
Okay, yeah, okay, yeah, good, good.
That's-
Gotcha.
It's not-
It's not
Okay.
No, it's
No, it's
No,
not.
Yeah. Medically mediated. Yeah,
You know, when I started writing the play,
Wow.
the council told me, like, this play is not about, that's when assisted death was just
Yeah.
being debated
Yeah.
before it was brought in. And they told me, I really don't want to play about that. And I thought, this is going to be a bit tricky. I was commissioned to write this play. So,
Yeah.
you know, you take on more challenges maybe when you're being commissioned than you would.
Mm-hmm.
And the more research I did, the more I realized how these are like two
Yeah.
completely separate,
Yes.
different pillars, right? Which I think everybody here knows, right?
Yeah, I think that's a whole other topic. I mean, there's.
Yeah, and there's like, you know, assisted dying is for people who are terminally ill and, you know, are suffering severe pain.
Yes.
I'm just about to say that in Halbert where I live, we're maybe the first or second, just a month ago, a couple assisted, went through assisted dying. They went through that whole process
Yeah.
and with their family and everything. So, first in Canada.
We've
Couple.
had two in this area in the last 5 years.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, no,
But
it
the
is.
education is the problem. I hate to categorize, but the general public, and I'm excluding Lindsay, myself, people in the medical profession, I'm retired, but anybody having to do with the medical profession, you as a counselor. Education is the biggest problem because the public cannot decipher. I'm going to kill myself and I want to kill myself. And there's a whole different ballgame
Well,
there.
I think
And
there's a
so
lot of
we
us out there that
don't-
understand that.
But there's a lot.
If there was a lot of people that understood it, there'd be a lot more people at this session. A
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
people want to bury their heads because
Yeah. No,
it's a subject that we hid for, it's like mental illness.
My community
Until 20
was
years
very
ago,
supportive of this.
Stigmatized.
but until 20 years ago, mental illness meant that you had a cousin that kept in the attic and nobody
Yes.
even knew they existed.
That's right.
Finally, it's come out into the public. Suicide still hasn't, in my opinion, not much.
And that
That's
leads
the
to a,
problem.
that is such a good point, and it leads to another challenge, which is the whole idea that, like, I am a huge proponent of seniors, right? People 28 to 40 years older than me are actually my favorite people to spend time with. You know, some people love spending time with little kids. I love spending time with people who are wise and have such imaginative and learned experience. And so people question me, saying, you know, I don't understand why people can't just die if they want to. And we actually have a facilitated talk back after the show. And one of the people said this in one of the sessions. Like, my cousin died. She wasn't even old. She wasn't even that old. And I thought, well, I guess she wanted to do it, so that was good. I miss her, but it's okay. And I liken that in my talk back as well as to, okay, so if my sister called me and said, my appendix just burst, I'm gonna die, I don't wanna go to the hospital, because I'm phobic about hospitals, I don't wanna go to the hospital, I'm gonna die. Carolyn, I respect her decision, I'm gonna get you. That's preposterous.
Yeah.
So to treat mental health as something different from physical health in that way, if somebody is not of sound mind, because you have to be of sound mind for assisted dying, if somebody's not of sound mind and says, you know, I don't want to talk to anybody, I'm just going to go into this pit, which sometimes includes alcohol, right, and just keep digging until I kill myself, you know, well, that's your decision, so you go ahead and do it.
But from a personal perspective, you don't know where you're at.
You don't know you're digging.
That's right.
Exactly.
I know I was on a downer, and my wife then, recognizing these problems, we go see the doctor, right? So we went together, and we went into the consulting room together with the doctor. So what seems to be the problem? My wife comes over with this list. Well, he's this, and this, you know, right? So she took her out of there and said, Ross, I can help you. I went to him twice, and he told me, you know, the human brain is like a computer. You know, you just have to reprogram it. That didn't work. That didn't work at all. So I said, okay, what's that all right? And my wife, working credit union in a hospital, knew this. We had a psychiatrist, right? Psychiatric department, and she talked to her. And this is you know what I'm trying to get away from. just trying to help. Strange. But in any case, the psychiatrist said, well, I can't make an appointment, it has to be on a referral basis. However, I'm on duty on Saturday, I'm coming as an outpatient. So the two of us went together, I went as an outpatient, and as soon as I checked in, the triage nurse said, what seems to be the problem with my head? She said, well, what did you do? I said, not that. Okay. I'm here to see Dr. So-and-so. So the psychiatrist put me in a room with two of her assistants, and they started questioning me and so on and so forth. And then the ultimate was suicide. Right? We were in suicidal depression. Kept me overnight in Merge, right? Pumped me up with all sorts of antidepressants. From that point, I went back into the lifestyle, but I had a series of visits. I didn't go anywhere until I made it. So, you don't know where you're at until you're told. In some cases, and I was told, you're suicidal. I guess in my conversation with her assistants, I came out that, well, if I was going to do it, this way or this way or this way, I had three different ideas in mind on how to commit suicide. I got it through. Would I have really done it? I don't know. But that was the evaluation.
One analogy is when you get the brakes, you go to the mechanic. The mechanic says, "Hey, your brakes are shot. You need them fixed."
Yeah.
And then they fix them, and then you drive your car, and you realize, holy shit, that pedal was really down there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, because it's relative, and you don't feel yourself,
Exactly.
you can't see the pit
Yeah.
that way. And like you said, it's very relevant too. It's like PTSD or anything else. Something that would drive one person lead them to suicide wouldn't bother you or wouldn't bother me. So that, well, not the youth, but the 16-year-old girl who is being cyberbullied, that might lead to her killing herself.
Right.
Whereas if somebody called us a name on Facebook,
I just turn off my computer.
yeah,
Or when you're
See, like,
sponsored worse.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, we have
But you're right.
Pardon?
We got you off track here a little bit.
Sorry.
Yeah,
No,
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 no, I started it, so we'll let you
So,
get.
no, I prefer to have a free-flowing conversation. So, Afterwise was produced, has been produced a number of times. It tours about every 6 months. And it's played at, this is a senior center, the Erin Senior Center. It plays at retirement homes. It's played for a conference, healthcare provider conference on seniors. And other places as well that I can't remember right now. But inevitably, after the show, at least one, because every show is followed, so it's a supported show, kind of like a TYA, Theater for Young Audiences show would be, right? It has this book, which is a resource book. Pass around if you want to see it. That goes out to the facility before the play is done, so people have information about it. And there are counselors in the room, so if anybody leaves, somebody will follow them just to make sure they're okay. And in fact, there's one person who was one of the co-creators of the play, one of the participants, who cannot see the show. He can't sit through it. Okay. He's read the script, because I offered everybody the opportunity to read the script before they saw it, just, again, out of respect, because it might be too hard to take. And the other thing we do is have a facilitated talk. And they wanted, I didn't realize this at the time, they wanted me to do the facilitated talk back because they wanted it approached more from a theatrical way than from a clinical way. So I usually start the talk back by talking to people about how the play was created and the fact that everything in the play comes from a story that happened to somebody in the community.
I worked for these people. I did assist.
Yeah, I've done that too.
Yeah, and became an assist facilitator, and that's what I kind of wanted to do in our community.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
it's,
Well, let me talk about that in a minute.
yes, okay,
Because
so,
that's one of the things that comes at the end of the facilitated talkback, right? It's just talking to people about the play and how it was created. And the council sees that as being a more peer-to-peer approach than something like Olympians talking about how they overcame depression.
Yeah.
Because for God's sake, they're Olympians,
Yeah, yeah.
right? I mean, they can do anything by definition. Not that Bell's initiative is not important, it is important, but this is a more local thing. And when I tell people that everything in there came out of a story that somebody told, and it's a conglomeration, you wouldn't recognize it. If you think you know the story, you don't, because we made it up, but it's a conglomeration of things. They're quite amazed, right? Particularly at the end. Ross is going to read a monologue at the end of the play. And I'll get to that. But the Safe Talk training, I don't know, since some of you are medical people, do you know about Safe Talk and assist training? So it's called First Aid for Mental Health. And when I took the assist training, I did that as part of the research for this. It's about how to talk to somebody who may be suicidal. And I thought, I thought I knew some stuff. It turned out everything I knew was wrong.
me
Right?
too.
You did the training? Yeah, so my thought had been to, if somebody says like they're feeling down and life isn't really worth living, it's kind of like, it's okay, Eric, you have a great life, you got this and this going for you, and you have so much. That is not helpful. In fact, that's the antithesis of being helpful. So having the courage to actually say to somebody, are you thinking of hurting yourself or killing yourself? Was just like so far out of my comfort range, but so valuable to learn. So that's something we touch on in the talkback, because I tried putting that in the play. And again, it was just so out there, right? Because it's so what we don't do, that the play just didn't ring true anymore, right? A lay person would be able to do that, right? Because it's about a person and his friends trying to help him. Right? A person whose sister dies suddenly by suicide, then he goes into a downward spiral, and his friends try to help him. He has one friend who is, kind of super caring, Helen, the helpful friend, and Walter, the warrior friend, kind of the curmudgeon. Well, let's just not talk about it, and you'll get better, right? It'll all work out. But that Safe Talk training, the assist training, was like a real life changer for me.
It's a very, very good question. Can I ask a question? When you when you got the stories, did you record them, or did you take notes while you were listening, or did you just trust yourself to remember the story, or?
Easy board and felt too.
No, not for the stories. That was for the facilitated session.
Yeah.
I don't record
No. Okay.
stories,
Okay.
because I think people, no, I never do that. Yeah, I make notes. But they're not that, because for my purposes, it's not a documentary that I'm
No.
doing, it's to get the gist of the story. And if it's wrong, the person's gonna come back and tell me anyway, right, if I got it wrong. But, so I just make some notes, and then I just do it mostly by memory. I don't even refer to the notes really,
Okay.
very seldom. It stays, right? The important stuff that for my purposes stays. So that goes. The response has been quite amazing from audiences. We tried to do it in front of small audiences. At a conference, there were about 80 people there, which was a little big because there's people who are crying at the end, and if they've had experiences with it, and that happened at the conference too. The service provider, too, actually, had direct experience and wanted to talk about it. And we generally do an audience of about 35 to 50 people. And then even after the show, audience members who didn't talk during the show will come up to me or one of the actors after the show and tell their story. Right? And another thing that the show has is it has a list of local resources in the program. So you don't have to ask for it, right? You get it with the program. Yeah. So we obviously don't have any pictures of the creation process because that was all confidential. But these are some Yeah, that's Dan and his sister who's drinking heavily just before she kills herself. So that, see, we just do it in whatever rooms we find. So we don't do it on stages. We do it in small community rooms. That was Aaron. There's Dan before he can get help. This is the Fergus, the Victoria Park Senior Center. You were asking me about that. That show was in late November.
So are they relatively short scenes, a number of relatively short scenes?
No, they're not. This is a full-length
This
play.
is- Okay.
Yeah, that had been the council's initial thought. You know, it's kind of like what you see is what you think can be done. But I couldn't see there being like,
Was the first one short?
yeah, the Our
Okay.
Voices was
Okay.
scenes on particular different
Okay.
facets.
So
But
this is a
this
full
is a
play.
deeper topic.
How long is it?
Runs 40 minutes. So,
Wait, gotcha.
and it was very important to me to have seniors acting in it, real seniors acting in it, not people playing older, real seniors acting in it, and directing it as well. Because I think there's a whole different energy when you have people playing their right age as opposed to somebody
Oh, yeah.
playing a senior. And I appreciate the complexity of it as opposed to simplifying something, you know, an old or.
Do you like your actors?
No, I don't like it. No, because that's
Some people's voices are lovely.
yeah. These are all actors.
Those two know better. I'm trying to.
Yeah,
We'll see the community theater actor.
Okay, there you
yeah, and one of them's an equity actor. So yeah, they have acting experience, and they actually the actors often say to me, you know, it's so nice to have an opportunity to do a serious play because they come from the same thing as the Brighton Playhouse,
Yeah.
right? Or like I've kind of done on farces.
Yeah.
go. So much.
Yeah. So basically, it's been a really great experience for the participants and for the audiences. It's been empowering for them. You want to talk about your?
I would just like to give due credit to Catherine because number one, the feedback that she got from this particular endeavor, but from our senior selfies as well. And the audience over 2 performances were invited to stay for the talk back. At least 3/4 of the audience remained. And some of the feedback, you got to take this on the road, you got to go here, you got to go there. The message is too important. You know. So that was our senior selfies dealing with all the different senior issues. This is a very specific issue. But the feedback is very important. And
Well, you know, you've reached people.
in fact, in the one performance, there was a gentleman who identified himself as a producer of Hollywood. Remember?
Yeah.
He said, oh, you guys have got to bring this down south.
Could you tell us about, for people that aren't aware, the New Horizons grant? I know people in my community, we have an organization called Visible Voices Open Art Studio. And it's a woman who has a passion for working with through the arts with people. So she found someone, and here I'm sorry. She found someone who would rent-free give her a space, a community, so that the art supplies that you would leave. There's tables in there, so it's open, you know, at particular times during the week, and you can just go in and create art. And she has some facilitators in there. So, so they bring in people from this, from the senior center. People like myself go, you know, maybe go on a Saturday and make Christmas cards or something like that. They bring in people from our, through the mental health work that's being done in the community. So, and those folks just had an art show. So she works with them once a week, and they just have an art show that they display. So it's kind of a way to start too. So, and I know that she had a grant from New Horizons to do that. Her first grant from New Horizons was to go to do basically the beginning of what you did, but not, she went into homes and talked to people and got their stories, and they actually were videotaped. And so we have a lovely a video production of about 5 seniors who talked about their lives and how art was an important part of their life. So can you talk to me a little bit about the Horizon Grant and what kinds of things are possible with it?
Well, I don't know the full scope. I only know, sort of from my project,
Well,
right?
that's
It's a
good.
$25,000 grant given by the federal government, up to $25,000. The deadline is June, I think, June the 1st or 15th every year. And it's to do a,
Criteria is working with seniors?
yes, criteria is it's a seniors-led program as well, right? So, and it has to be, you have to be a charity to get it. So I was working, I came to this because I'm part of an ecumenical retreat center just outside of Guelph called Eremos Eden. And they are a charity. I think you have to be a charity to get a Horizons grant. And so they were actually looking for programming for their space, right? So that was how they originally came up with the idea. Well, you got to do a theater project, of course, right?
Yeah.
Let's do a theater project. So they were the organizers of it, right?
Right.
But a lot of it is seniors. They're interested in seniors-led stuff.
Yeah, so sort of for anybody that is interested in doing something, that's a really good website to go to.
And we've also gotten an Ontario Seniors Community Grant. Through the Seniors Directorate. And there's this very cool thing happening. So that grant seems to be fairly easy to get. I think the criteria are kind of the same, I don't remember. But there's something new that's coming up that the Ontario Arts Council has been telling me about, which is it's a $5 million fund for empowering seniors. And actually, I was talking to somebody from the OAC this morning, and she reminded me about it. It was supposed to come out in the spring, but it's going to be in the fall now that it starts. It's called Engaging Seniors Through the Arts, $5 million fund, scheduled for a fall launch, which is, I'm going to be all over that because that's exactly what I do. It's really my passion.
So when you're talking about telling stories, this is so interesting. So last 10 months ago, I went to at our local art gallery. I went to a show of these people that are working through the mental health and focused agencies in our community. So there were 10 people that were part of this Visible Voices project, and so they met for a year, once a week, created and talked. And they were artists. They were sort of latent artists themselves, and work was amazing. And every week they did some sort of a different technique or some, used a different medium, that sort of thing that they were. So then they had this art show. Well, we could probably get out of the building during the art show because everybody wanted to talk to you and tell you their story. Every one of those people were so proud of the work that they did, and they just wanted to share their stories. And I'm telling you, I was there for 4 hours, and 4 months, and get your own dinner. I'm not coming home. People, I gotta talk. So it was very interesting, and I just equate that with seniors and giving them the opportunity to do the same kind of thing.
When you finally turn on the tap, right,
Yeah.
and let people tell their stories. In fact, one of our participants in the Art Voices group, because I know them better because it was a project went for 4 years, ranged from about their late 60s to the oldest participant, seats got 95.
Wow.
Right? And she told me one day, we really like these sessions. And I said, well, that's good. I'm glad you feel comfortable with them. I'm not making you do calisthenics or anything like that. She said, no, we like these sessions because it's the only time of the week we feel listened.
Yeah, but there's another aspect to that too. We had 2 with mobility problems that we had to accommodate and did very well getting them up on stage. That didn't hold them back. They were very, very involved.
Luckily, we found a theater that had elevator access to the stage level, which is very rare. Even the
Sure is.
even the senior center where Ross is on the board just got that recently.
It's got to be installed.
So that was important. Yeah. So do you have anything else you want to add, Ross?
I don't think so. I think it's covered an awful lot.
Can
Unless there's any questions,
Can I tell your story about my remembrance of your story?
well, you go right ahead.
We were
Like I said, I'm an open book.
we were talking over dinner about how we remember things differently, and I told Ross, that when he first told a story about a man who was depressed and suicidal depression, he handed the story, he wrote it out himself. Normally I wrote the stories down, but I always really encourage anybody to write if you wanted to. And then I turned the story into a scene that we read out we're going to read out at one of the weekly sessions. After going back and forth, I always use the same process. I don't share work with anybody else until the creator, the storyteller, is comfortable with it. So Ross said he was comfortable with it, and we were sitting actually down by the river where we often sat as a group. And just after the break, before we were going to read the story, this is my memory, which could be faulty. Ross told me I have to go. I have to do something. Okay. Do you want us to not read the story? I said, no, it's okay. Read the story. So we read the story, and we were saying, well, why are we reading the story when Ross isn't here? Ross was okay with it. And people who read it was a scene actually. People who read that scene, who were there that day, said, wow, you know, I have so much admiration for this character, for the strength he had to make changes in his life and to move forward. And so I called Ross and told him that, and we agreed that the play would be in the show. That scene would be in the show, even though I told people right up until dress rehearsal, you can pull your scene, right? Your fellow actors may not like it, but you can pull your scene if you feel uncomfortable. And then Ross decided he wanted to act the part. So I pulled him aside and said, Ross, are you sure you want to do this? He said, yeah, of course, my story.
Sure.
And then told everybody, that's my story.
Sylvester Stallone himself.
Yeah.
So the third person became first person.
Yeah.
But it was difficult to do because I had to take myself back to the state of mind I was in for the first part of the scene. And the more buoyant we needed the scene.
How did you? This is it's psychological drama. Is really what it is. So how did you write with all those times when you were alone and you were going through this by yourself? How did you handle those scenes? Were you doing soliloquies or?
I was long out of that state of mind. I was in a brand new relationship and a brand new life, so writing the story did not impact me negatively at all. It was,
No, but when it was
No,
when it was
but-
turned into
but
a scene.
when it was turned into a scene,
you know,
how did you do that? Were you on stage by yourself, or
Yeah.
did you invent other characters to draw this stuff out of it?
well, the way Catherine wrote the scene, you know, I'm sitting on a bench, you know,
Yeah,
very depressed,
yeah.
and the long-time friend stops by.
Oh,
She brought someone into the scene
all right.
to recognize that I wasn't too well. You know, we just carried on from there.
Yeah. Like the truth of the story is not necessarily in the events that happen.
No.
Right?
Okay,
So
yeah.
I try to stay true to what is the
I get
kernel
you.
of the story, right?
Sure.
But you're right, and this was even a bigger problem with Afterwise, right? Because it's a 40-minute play about a man who gets increasingly depressed, and you don't just show that by having somebody sit there for
No.
Yeah.
30 minutes, unless you're doing experimental theater.
Could a community do this play? Like you're talking about, you can't make any inlays with anybody. Could Frank take this? I don't know. Could Frank take this play to his community, show it to like maybe you're going to have an audience of 5, 10, 12 people, and then start to talk about suicide in his community,
Mhm.
or is it too big? Yeah.
No, I mean that
Yeah.
is possible. The one thing that the Suicide Awareness Council is concerned about is that there be somebody who has a knowledge about suicide. So it's not just a play that's being presented in a vacuum, right? And then everybody goes home and that's what, for the same reason we never do shows on Friday, right? Because there's fewer community supports on the weekend.
So this play is available through the Suicide Awareness as well. Your play.
Yeah, no, it's my play. I hold a copyright.
So do you allow that to happen?
Yeah.
Communities, and so there's a
But I-
charge presumably. For
Well, we could talk about it. I'm very committed to this show getting out because I see the powerful impact that
Are
it's
there
had.
any plans to remount with the the town, the suicide.
Yes,
town.
it's the show is going on tour in
Right, so
September.
it's regularly
Yeah.
coming back up.
Okay,
So
so,
the next tour is in
so we would contact you at your website and
yeah, or on my email address.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's it.
because the
Yeah.
tour could even be
Start
extended,
something.
right?
Yeah.
Because we have it's a lot of work for the actors to learn the lines of.
Sure. And so then you're,
Exactly.
so the cost, there's the cost of your work, there's the cost of getting the people there, having them stay, do they need to stay overnight possibly, and getting them back again to where to their home. So there is some cost, and so we need to think about where some grants or some money.
And you
Yeah.
build in some touring stuff too. You're
Right,
gonna go
yeah, in
far
that,
beyond
this
than-
is the man who knows how to do that, right
Well, I was
there.
gonna say Haley is probably for Kentucky, because, you know, something like Ontario presents.
Are municipal grants available? If you wanted to bring it into a smaller
Not so
community?
much,
Yeah.
but there is, well, they were talking about it, understand yesterday, there's like, Nora was talking about it, the OAC touring grant.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I met with her
that's
this
sort of
morning to
something-
talk about
Yeah.
that.
But you know who else are, like depending how much it costs, but we all have CART, which is, and what does that stand for? I don't know.
Canadian Association of Retired Persons.
Sure.
There you go. And CART has one. So there's places that have, you just kind of find in your
Yeah.
community who's got a few dollars here, a few dollars there. It's getting that big money is hard, but then there's this OAC coming in the fall, which is
Yeah, and that's
significant
sort of
amount of money.
something you would think support, and
Yeah.
I see this as something that you would be easily able to, if you had some touring money behind it, this could go to any community. I think there's, like this offers an accessible way into another way that is very taboo, like I said, very, very taboo topic that nobody's, there's a lot of stigma around. This is a way to start a conversation that is a tool that most of these other communities don't have, like.
And our population is increasingly aging,
Yep.
right?
Yep. No, I can think of like people who are like who work in senior centers and with seniors, with older adults. I can say yes, this is exactly what I've been looking for. This kind of a way to bring this topic into to start the conversation.
And that's always the value of theater, right? It puts the topic out there without me having to say, I'm Catherine and this happened to me, right? It's like, well, that's Dan, and that happened to him. And I understand what he went through or what his friends went through. I've been one of those friends, right? Trying to think, fuck up, like, you can do it, right?
I'm going to be that person that says it's 11:45, and
It
you
is?
talked about Hobbiton, and you talked about a monologue,
Oh, shoot, thank you.
so
Yeah.
we might like to end.
So this is really one of the things that made me most happy. Is there is one person who was part of the show, part of the development process, and this was the person who hadn't been able to talk about the suicide of her sibling since 1985. And she told me when I was talking to her, that it was hard to find anything positive. Of course, we want to end the show on a positive note. And she told me, the one time I felt really good was a teacher called me up. She was a nurse. A teacher called me up and said that I had this boy in my school and his sibling just died by suicide. Would you talk to him? And she said, I don't have anything to say to him, right? I'm just trying to deal with my own problem. I said, he really needs someone to talk to. And she talked to that kid. And for her, that was a turning point in her life. So this is Dan's final monologue.
Or just the last part?
Yeah. You just want to read the monologue. So he's been at Tim Hortons meeting with his two friends, and then we find out that Jeremy is coming, right? And his friend said, "Are you going to be okay?" He's a little uncertain, and then he says, "No, I'm going to do it." So this is the monologue, the final monologue of the play that he gives out to the audience, because Jeremy is an unseen character in the play.
So they're sitting in Tim Hortons, awaiting your arrival at the sofa. This is Dan. Hello, Jeremy. Would you like to sit down? Do you want a donut or some Timbits? The ones with sprinkles were Sally's, my sister's favorites. She liked everything bright and colorful. And she loves sunny days like today, to be outdoors. Have you hiked the First St. Williams Trail? She's been fighting for that trail for 8 years. And it's because of her that we still have most of it. But I was asking about timbits. Would you like some? Sorry? Oh, louder, yes, okay. Do you have any trouble eating? It was the same for me after Sally died by suicide. Something, well, it's hard for me to talk about this. Something happened to my sister, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what it was. But I'll never know because she would talk about it. And I wanted to let go of my guilt about that. I couldn't see it coming because she didn't talk to me about it. Do you feel angry that your sister... Yes, I did too. I think it's okay to feel angry. Angry and betrayed. And I don't know about you, but I wondered if I was going to do the same thing she did. Because we were so close. She was my twin sister. I think that's a natural question to ask. I had all these emotions and I got depressed. I thought I was worthless and useless. And I didn't see that there were a lot of people who cared about me, my family and friends. But I couldn't know that unless I talked to them. That's probably the most important thing I've learned. Things got all bent out of shape in my mind, so I couldn't get help for myself. I needed to talk to someone I trusted. We all need to talk to someone.
Excellent. There you go. Excellent.
Really good.
And that is the important.
Yeah. So when the person who I was meeting with told me that, I went, that was very early on. I was like, just found the ending for the play.
Yeah, they spoke there, it's in there.
Yeah.
So
That was the
you wrote
message for Jared, yes.
Your message. That was great.
Yeah.
My mother committed suicide when I was 24. It was a hard thing to deal with,
Yeah.
but I never in my entire life thought of me myself, you know, and my sister and mother and stuff at the same time. It was just
You know, just
and of
that,
course that was in the sort of mid-70s.
A couple of years ago.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and stigma of somebody in your family committing suicide is put on everybody else too. So, because I remember when I went to my doctor when I was expecting my second child, and he was a new doctor and he was taking me, you know, and so when did your mother die and whatever, and what did she die of? And he said she committed suicide. Oh, and he starts to, you know, like make a note here, and I just said, excuse me, I'm not my mother.
Right, it's
Oh,
hereditary. Good for
You know what I mean? It was like, that was the first time after a number of years that she'd been gone, like, yeah, she was about 5 years old. And that was, no, you're not going to define me by what my mother did.
Right.
You know?
And this is not something I shared with Catherine, but that last dialogue, we need someone to talk to. During the suicide and depression, of course, and just after the separation, I made attempts at reconciliation in the marriage. I went to my family doctor for 25, 30 years. He knew the depression and so on. And he said, how are things? And I told him, attempt to reconcile. I said, why would you want to go back to a relationship that nearly killed you?
Yes.
I said the same thing to the Jungian analyst I was seeing. You know, that, well, I made attempts to reconcile. Same thing. Why would you want to go back to a relationship that nearly killed you? And my sister, who was my strongest supporter, said the same thing. That kind of made me think, yeah, why do I want to go back to a situation that nearly killed me?
But in the back of your mind, you're probably trying to go back to the happy days way back when.
Yes.
That's exactly what you're.
So all attempts at reconciliation at that point ceased. I had a few dates with ladies online, and then I beat one.
I think what that would be very normal, because I think what happens is you get into a comfort zone. And for you, perhaps, and for many people who I've known, including myself, if depression is your normal, if you're not depressed, you got to get used to that, because it doesn't feel normal. So perhaps in your psyche, you were going to go back into that comfort zone, which of course would have been the wrong thing to do. But I think when we're depressed, we get comfortable with our own depression, and it becomes a habit almost.
It's a habit, but it's not a comfortable habit.
No.
But when you're out of it, it's what am I doing here?
You know,
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's the devil I know.
Yeah,
It's easier to handle than the
I
devil I
didn't
don't know.
No, we are all creatures of
suggest
habit.
that it's at all
Yeah.
enjoyable.
There's another release though as well, and part of it was what I passed on to Catherine in my writing. I read.
Yeah.
I write for myself. And I
Yeah.
have written so much about the state of mind, my thoughts, this, that, and the other thing. So I got a photo like that of writings.
Well, I gotta say, in spite of the topic, this has been delightful.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, it always is.
Yeah. To be
Yeah.
able to
It's
have
not a
people
topic that is,
to talk freely and
Yeah.
comfortably. We created a feeling of trust very quickly, and you two did that for us. So
yeah, thanks.
Thanks for staying.